Welcome to Discovering the Law. My name is Lucia Rivera and I am the host of today's program. Today we have a very special guest. Supreme Judicial Court Justice Ralph Gants is here with us to give us an overview of the court system. And he's also the co-chair of the Justice Access Commission. Judge Gants, thank you so much for being here today with us.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Please tell us about what are the changes that the court system is going through in Massachusetts.
There are actually a lot of changes happening. There's certainly a generational change in leadership. We now have a manager for the court system, a court administrator, Harry Spence, who is quite terrific, who's been there a year and a half. We have a new trial court chief. There are 7 departments in our court system for each of the various areas of justice, Superior Court, District Court, and Probate and Family. We have 4 new chiefs, and we're going to have 2 more new chiefs by the end of this year. So at the end of this year, there's going to be there's a new court administrator, a new trial court chief. 6 of the 7 department chiefs are going to be changed. So there really is a generational shift which is occurring. There's also, I think, an important philosophical shift which is occurring, which is that increasingly we are seeing ourselves as problem solvers. We're recognizing that every time a person comes to court, they're coming because they have a very important problem, whether it be in a civil case, a problem involving a divorce, or a problem involving an eviction, or in a criminal case, certainly a problem involving a crime, which is a problem not only for the victim, but certainly a problem for the criminal. And what is happening is that we are looking increasingly to be better able to solve those problems. We're focusing in the civil area on mediation, on arbitration, on having judges attempting to resolve problems in a way that both is effective and efficient, so that people are able to resolve these disputes in a manner that is cost effective for them. And the criminal side, we're looking very, very hard at not only providing appropriate punishment for the defendant, but also trying to ensure that the defendant does not come back into our court system, and trying to resolve issues that may have brought the person there. Too many of our criminal defendants are facing problems in terms of drugs, of alcohol abuse, of anger management. Some of them have served in our armed forces and are suffering the effects of combat in terms of the psychological problems that has caused. So we're looking increasingly at working with those defendants, having judges providing them with probation, with focusing them on ways in which they can address those problems. And that has moved us increasingly into drug courts, into mental health courts, into veterans courts. In fact, we're beginning a veterans court in Boston next month with a former military officer, now a judge, who will be presiding, who is going to be very sensitive to the problems that returning veterans have had. So we really are having a focus on how we can address the problems that bring people to court, how we can make sure that criminals are addressing the problems that brought them to court, and also ensuring that victims are adequately treated. So there's a lot happening, a lot of good happening in our court system right now.
And those are really great. That's a great overview as to all the changes. Tell us a little bit more as to those, how it's composed, the different departments in the trial court. What are they and what are they for? We have 7 trial departments. They focus on different areas of law. There's the Superior Court, where I was once a judge, which handles the more serious criminal cases, and it handles the civil cases, which involve matters of injunctive relief, and it also involves matters where there is more than $25,000 at issue. We have the District Court, which are our community courts, where the vast majority of problems that people face are presented, problems involving restraining orders, problems involving crimes of alcohol and drugs, and various civil disputes that would be resolved there, including small claims. Probate and Family Court, where matters involving divorce and custody would be reached. Land Court, where there are disputes involving property. Juvenile Court, where juveniles go where they are facing problems with the law or problems in terms of
of parenting, and we also, I'm missing one, but
court and juvenile
land,
court,
probate, juvenile,
Supreme,
superior, district, and
I think you mentioned all of them, the 7 departments.
is that right? Okay, if I've gotten all 7, then I have.
You said all of them, pretty much the 7. The BMC and the different
And
trial
the
courts.
that's right. The BMC is a variation on the district court, which covers the area of Boston. So, and deal with the same kinds of problems that district courts would be dealing with.
And in all these changes, you talked about leadership. So, what are the leadership changes in this trial court complex system?
Well, one of the key changes is a vision that management is important. Before, we have had a judge who served both as manager and also as the trial court chief. The legislature recognized, I think many of us have recognized, that the courts need managers as well as judges. And we have brought in somebody who will serve as a manager for the court system to attempt to. And the kind of management changes that are being made are changes that involve improved use of technology. We're working on a new website. We're hoping to be able to have individuals be able to file by email, by e-filing, so that they can actually submit their claims in court. We're working to reduce the administrative costs. We're working essentially to get much bigger bang for the buck in terms of what goes on in our court system, so that people can more efficiently resolve their cases and judges can more effectively be able to do their jobs.
And when is this website launching?
Well, we're hoping to launch it actually coming this spring. It turns out to be a much more challenging project than we had recognized, because we are attempting to do quite terrific things with regard to it. We really want it to be a one-stop shopping area for those people who are coming to our court system. It integrates all of the various departments into a single website, including our appellate courts. And the hope is that people will be able to get the information they need, both as to where to go, as to what forms they need to fill out, and also some information about the law that may affect their case, so they can educate themselves about the law before they go into court.
Very interesting. When you spoke about problem solvers, so how does this get accomplished with the different departments in the trial court?
Well, it's really a focus on what problems bring them there. Let me use housing court as an example. Housing court has, of course, enormous problems with regard to foreclosure and problems with regard to eviction. Every time a person is being evicted, it is a problem certainly for the tenant who is losing their apartment and their home. It's also a problem for the landlord who is losing a tenant and very often has gone many, many months without rent and may have problems in their ability to pay a mortgage. What the housing court has is 2 types of resources that are not generally available. They have housing specialists, which will help to mediate those cases, hope to find a sensible result, which will perhaps allow the tenant to remain there and perhaps find other resources to enable the landlord to be made whole, or to be made at least better off than they would be if they were to lose the tenant. And there's also a tenancy preservation project that is for those persons who sometimes have mental health problems, or which may have been a source of the problems that are resulting in their eviction, to make sure that they don't find themselves homeless and to find other homes for them. So the idea is not only to be able to resolve the particular claim, but also to increase the possibility that there is a sensible result both for the tenant and for the landlord.
And you also spoke about special courts, and that is, I think, something new. Would you like to tell us about what these special courts are and what they do?
The specialty courts have begun a little bit, and we're attempting to enlarge them greatly. There are, I think, going to be 23 drug courts around the state, focusing on those persons who are brought to the criminal court because of a drug case, very often an issue with regard to addiction, a person who's been charged either with possession or with possession with intent to distribute a relatively small amount, and to focus really on helping them to address their drug problem. There's a judge who's working directly with them, along with the probation officer, along with drug counselors, to be able to monitor their progress, to be able to hit them where they need to be hit if they're falling short, but also to be really working to be resolving the particular problems that they have, ensuring that they get appropriate drug treatment, hoping that they get the appropriate training to be able to find a job or go back to school, and work with them so they don't really, they're not coming back with another drug case, but hopefully managing to find the education or the employment that they're going to need, as well as the drug treatment that they're going to need to be able to move on with their lives.
And that's one of the focus of the trial court system as a problem solver, coming up with the specialty courts.
Well, that's the hope. I mean, it's not, we really hope we're past the days in which all we do is send somebody to jail and they finish their jail term and they still have the same drug problem, the same anger management problem, the same emotional and mental health problems they had when they came in. Unless we address those problems, we're not likely to be able to have them move on with their lives, and we're likely to see them again. So just as hospitals, when they release patients, would like to believe they're not going to be coming back to the hospital with the same problem, so too would we like to think that we can work with defendants who have drug cases and be able to ensure that they don't come back with more drug cases.
Yes, so you also talked about a new court. I think I'm not sure if it's new, maybe you could tell us a little bit about that Veterans Court.
The Veterans Court, there's one court right now already in Dedham, one is starting up in Boston,
That's really interesting.
addressing the particular problems that veterans have, of which, of course, PTSD is the most common. But too often, post-traumatic stress syndrome.
Yes.
Too often they are coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan, facing a problem in terms of finding a job, a problem in terms of returning to a life which they have left for 6 months to 2 years because they've been in our nation's service. And they often find themselves with drug problems or alcohol problems that get them in trouble with the law. And the hope is that we can work with them to help them address those problems and also to make proper use of the veterans benefits and veterans programs that are available for them. So part of that is to be, in fact, we're receiving money from both the city as well as from the Veterans Administration to be able to ensure that they get the services that they need to get back on their feet and to properly ensure that after having served their country abroad, that the country now is serving them to help them deal with some of the problems that were perhaps either created or exacerbated when they were fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan.
It sounds more like these courts are more of a community rather than regular court.
It is it's a court, but it very often it's certainly a community focus, and we're trying to bring together the various services that are going to be needed to help them. We haven't forgotten that they perhaps have committed a crime which got them there, and that will be addressed as well. But we really want to make sure that they are getting back on their feet and being able to return to civilian society and address the problems that they have faced upon their return.
And is that a new specialty court?
That's one of the
or new
specialty courts. I mean, there are some people who refer to them as problem-solving courts, and I resist that because, in my view, every court is a problem-solving court. So I hate to identify those and say those are the only problem-solving courts and the rest are not. But I think they create a model for all of the court system to be recognizing that every case is a problem and a problem to be solved, and that in every criminal case, there's a victim with a problem. We need to address their concerns and the problems that the crime has caused them. But there's also a problem with regard to the defendant, and that it does not serve society or the defendant for them to come back. And the extent to which we can address those problems and get them back on their feet and get them education and employment and make sure that they're not facing the same problems that brought them there will allow all of us to be better off.
And that goes also for the third one, which is a mental health court.
Mental health courts is similar in that we have individuals, as you know, who face very severe mental health problems, and some of them mean that they end up in court, and there often is a thin line between whether they should be in a criminal court or whether they should be somewhere else dealing with mental health problems that may have brought them there. So the thought is to bring the appropriate resources to bear to address their issues of whether it be schizophrenia, whether it be bipolar, and to be able to work with them to get appropriate medication, appropriate services that they too can manage to manage their mental health problem and not, again, find themselves back in court.
Do you find that people with mental health issues, do you find that they end up in jail where they could probably end up belonging to another place, like like an institution, or
well,
is
there certainly is a problem for persons with mental health problems to be in jail. It's certainly not a place which is going to improve their mental health. And the thought is there are differences between those persons who may have issues of violence, who may need to be in prison, versus those individuals with mental health problems which can be addressed in a more clinical setting, where we can not necessarily put them into a place where they're dealing with hardened criminals, but working with them to see if we can address their problems with the appropriate clinical and medication that they're going to need to be able to make sure that they stay stable and don't find themselves with the ups and downs, say, of bipolar disorder.
And why are these specialty courts effective?
They're effective because they're focused on solving problems, and they're bringing the problem solvers together. It does take more than a judge to be able to solve it. I know back in my day when I was a Superior Court judge dealing with a person with a mental health or a drug problem, I would need a place to send the defendant to be able to receive drug treatment. I would need to have the person have access to mass health so that the person can receive proper medication and proper support. And I need an effective probation officer to make sure that the person is taking their medication and is finding a bed in a drug treatment center and is complying with the regimen, that is, taking the drug tests and making sure that they stay clean. So it really takes a whole group of people who are working together to solve a problem. The mere ability of a judge to set a sentence and to establish an order doesn't do much good if there is no one there who can enforce that order, or no one there who can work with the defendant in order to address the problems that brought them there.
And did you mention also probation? What are the changes going on with probation, and how is that effective in changing people's lives?
Well, I mean, probation, as you know, has gone through some tough times over the last year. There's new leadership there. There's Ed Dolan, who is bringing a vision of probation as, I use the term recidivism, that is trying to address the problems which bring them back into the court system. And that's really a twofold problem. One is we want to make sure that probation is involved in helping to judges to craft sentences that are going to be more effective in being able to address those problems. So part of it is to assist the judge in figuring out what is a sensible and fair sentence that's going to be most effective in reducing recidivism. And the second part is providing the kind of probation supervision that they are going to need to ensure that they follow the probation conditions, that they get the appropriate help that they need. And it's a tough job. I mean, part of what it means to be a probation officer is to be spending enough time with your probationer to know what's going on in their lives. And that means, and that often can't be done 9 to 5. That means you have to pay a visit to their home at 9, 10 p.m., make sure they're home, make sure they're following the probation conditions. And it is a challenging job, and I think there really is a new sense of purpose that's going on in the probation department as they focus on this fundamental problem of reducing the recidivism rate.
And this came about as part of your strategic plan. Tell us more about this strategic plan.
Well, we have a strategic plan, and I know for a lot of people they think a strategic plan is something that you establish goals and then forget about. This is meant to be a different strategic plan. They've established goals, and now they are working very hard to implement them with very demanding deadlines, and things are happening, and things are happening actually at an accelerating rate. The overarching theme of the strategic plan is justice with dignity and speed. Dignity reflecting that we want every litigant to be treated with dignity, no matter
whether they have counsel or not, recognizing that too many of our litigants are appearing in court without counsel. And speed, to recognize that since every court case is a problem, we need to be able to solve those problems promptly and efficiently. The cost of litigation is becoming a real problem for a lot of people, which is why an increasing number of litigants are appearing without counsel, because they can't afford counsel.
It's true.
So the ability to have those cases resolved sensibly and promptly and quickly is also a way to cut the cost of legal counsel and both allow them to afford counsel, and for those who can't, to be able to receive the legal resources they may need to be able to manage their cases more effectively.
And you said access to justice with dignity and speed. And we know that you are the co-chair of the Access to Justice Commission. Tell us about that commission.
Well, the commission is comprised of private attorneys, of legal services attorneys, of judges. We work together focusing on a variety of projects. Let me tell you right now the kind of projects we're working on as we speak. One is the commission has identified the housing court as a place in which persons with housing problems are more effectively dealt with than they probably are in a district court or in the Boston Municipal Court, which are dealing with a whole host of other problems. The housing court is focused on housing problems. The judges are knowledgeable in it. They have the housing specialists to assist in resolving those cases. But it turns out that 1/3 of the state doesn't have access to a housing court. It's not a statewide court. And one of the things we're doing is trying to bring the housing court to the other third of Massachusetts who presently does not have a housing court. The other thing we're working on is we're trying to make sure that every attorney in this state is focused on their obligation to provide pro bono legal services. And we want that to start upon graduation from law school. So we have proposed, and the Boston Bar Association and Mass Bar Association has itself joined us in calling for a section of the bar exam. That's going to be the Access to Justice section of the bar exam. We hope, if approved by my court, that every person who's becoming a lawyer will have to begin to learn the type of problems that each of us face, the problems of what I call the problems of everyday life, problems in terms of housing and probate and family law, the kind of problems that each of us have, and be able to better be able to deal with those problems as community lawyers. So we're focusing on those who are finishing law school, beginning the bar. We also have a program for those who have been retired as attorneys. We have an Access to Justice Fellows program, where those who are recently retired from the law but still very able and very active are providing 10 to 15 hours a week of pro bono service. That began as having 7 terrific attorneys last year doing that. It's now 12 or 13 attorneys this year. Every attorney who has done that program has continued to do their pro bono work for various community agencies. And the hope is that we'll develop a vision in which every attorney, whether it be a new attorney or a retired attorney, still recognizes the importance of doing pro bono work. So those are the kind of projects that we are working on. We're also always trying to get more money for legal services. Right now, legal services must turn away half of those who are eligible for legal services because they just don't have the attorneys that they need to be able to represent them. Federal money is diminished, state money is held up, but the other source of funding has been interest on legal accounts, and as you know, the interest rate has been very, very low.
Yes.
So that used to account for about $18 million. It now accounts for $4 million for legal services. So they have had very difficult economic times, and part of what the commission has done is to try to find new sources of revenue. In fact, we have managed to find $1.5 million of revenue for legal services through the voluntary contributions of private attorneys. As a when one pays one's legal dues, there's a $51 voluntary fee, which will go to legal services, and 1/3 of the attorneys in the state do pay that. So we're trying to figure out any way we can to be able to improve the ability of individuals to have legal services attorneys, because they're just so critical to the ability of the poor to be able to get a fair shake in court.
And Justice Gants, I've been told that we're running a little bit out of time, but I know that you mentioned language as a way to to allow, promote access to justice. Tell us a little bit about it, even though we are going to have to wrap it up pretty
Okay.
soon.
Just as a number of years ago, schools recognized that they can't turn away students who don't speak English very well, so too our courts can't turn away any person who does not speak English. So we are working to improve the ability of persons who have language issues to be able to get interpreters and translators. We're developing a new program in Worcester, which is the hope will be an ideal place where we're going to learn how best to provide support services for those persons who need language skills. The goal, the need is to make sure that everybody, no matter how well they speak English, no matter how much money they may have in their bank account, each receive the same fair shake in court.
Your Honor, I hope you join us again. We've run out of time, but wonderful things are happening in the judicial court system that you've learned about. Thank you for coming to today's show, and thank you to all our viewers. I hope you learned a little bit about the justice system. My name is Lucy Rivera, and this is Discovering the Law. Our guest is Justice Ralph Gants from the Supreme Judicial Court. Thank you for watching.